Well, hello. Welcome to Discover Dorico for August. Um, I'll be keeping an eye on the comments today as always, so let me know if there's any problems with hearing me or anything else. There's a bunch of people from across the world so far, all saying hello. So even the Netherlands, I was there yesterday. So it's been a few weeks. There's been various new videos on our YouTube channel from Anthony. There was one recently on automation, and one today on Ossias. And there's been a new arranging with Dorico with Andrew from the Baltic Soul Orchestra. There's a new video for that. It was shot at Rimshot Studios in Kent, the Garden of England. It's a lovely boutique little studio with some analog and digital gear, and it was nice to shoot that video. It's quite a different style to a lot of our others, so check that one out if you're interested in soul and pop and jazz arranging and that kind of thing. I've been doing travels, of course. I've been to places like universities like York St John recently, and hello to the people I saw at the ABCD convention last week. The Association of British Choral Directors. I've been at Artes University, so I was over flying through Amsterdam yesterday. So hello to various people I've seen in places, and over the summer, well, the summer we've been having in the Northern Hemisphere, we've also had a new update to Dorico version 2.1. So today I thought there's a few things I thought we could talk about. And thank you for all the people who've had input into the session today. If you want to have input into future sessions, then you can, of course, always email discoverdorico@steinberg.de, or you can get in touch via the Facebook group. I'm presuming there's no problem so far in hearing me today because nobody's commented. Of course, as always, on YouTube, there's a little cog in the bottom right-hand corner. If you click on that one, then you can get various audio settings. So make sure that's up as high as possible so things don't look blurry. Of course, you've got the audio volume options in there as well. I should also say, if you can subscribe to our channel, once you've pressed the subscribe button, there's then also a little bell icon that you can click on. If you want to be notified when these sessions go live and when new videos go live on our channel, then you need to click on that little bell as well to make sure you're notified at the time. I noticed my computer just told me I'm live, which I already knew. So various things I thought we could look at today. Some of these have been sent in by questions that we had via Facebook with questions people had, and I thought it was worth covering some of these in one of the sessions, and also a couple of things that I've been working on as examples for things and that kind of thing. And of course, some version 2 little update things. I thought there's a few things that maybe you might not have noticed in the update that it was worth kind of mentioning as I go if I found them useful. So things like you can now in play mode up here, you can select the instrument here, and then you can audition that one on your MIDI keyboard. Just by selecting these in here, and you'll see there'll be a little item here that she'll tell you which one's selected. So it's a useful, quick little option for when you want to audition particular sounds. So things like that, we'll look at some of those in 2.1 as well. Little things you might not have noticed. So the first one is this piece, which is a little excerpt. Now, I did this one because I was going to see, as I said, the Association of British Choral Directors, and John Rutter is the patron there. And there are also some publishers there, such as Oxford University Press and various other people. And this particular piece and this particular version was one I remember doing when I was at school, and I recently visited my old school, so it all came together. It was quite nice. But I did this an excerpt of this just as an example of some some choral work. But there were a few things that I thought were worth mentioning with this one regarding kind of particular spacing things. So what you can see at the moment is the default settings. When if you just input this into Dorico, this is the score view, and what you're seeing now is the default settings and spacing and those kind of things. Now, actually, the version that I had, which is a little PDF of here. If I just scroll this one a bit, you'll see actually it's a bit tighter spacing compared to the version that I've got in Dorico. So I just wanted to show you a few things that I did to do some of those things, just to edit it a bit in Dorico. Now, what I'd like to also point out is that I'm not going to be dragging staves around manually and those kind of spacing type things. These will be changing some of the settings to do things a bit more automatically. So what I will start with in this one is I'll go into layout options. I've just realized once again I'm not running mouse expose, so you won't be able to see my keyboard shortcuts. So let's turn on keystrokes. There we go. So I'll go into layout options. And there were a few things that I set up in here. Now you'll notice actually I've got a number of layouts because I was doing a few things on this one, but the one I'm actually using is this Full Score 2. What a great name. So the first thing was that in staves and systems, to match the original one, actually they did label piano at the beginning, but then the staff labels were turned off for everything else. So I'll press none on that one, so that they'll disappear. Now what I'm aiming partly there is just because I don't want the labels and I need the space that was on there as well. I also noticed the first thing I noticed was actually that the note spacing was actually a lot tighter than the Dorico default, and that's of course making more music fit on the page. So I thought that was definitely worth doing. So to match the style, what I did is I just reduced this default space for the crotchet or quarter note option here, and found that 3.5 actually was the best option. Now, what I was looking at was the top line of the piano here to make sure that kind of thing was matching. But because you can leave these layout options dialogues open, I had this one open in another monitor so that I could then tweak some of the layout options whilst leaving that one open and see what was happening on the score at the time, which is a very useful thing to do. The other thing I noticed was that as well as the note spacing, the staff spacing was actually slightly smaller. So in page setup, I changed the rastral size here down a notch to 4 or 6.5mm staff. So I'll apply that one. So now I was starting to get the music appearing and matching a lot closer to the original. I'll just move this out of the way for a minute so you can see some of the changes we've done there. But also, what I found was that I needed a bit more space on the page, but also the staves are a bit too far apart. So not necessarily in this order, but I reduced the music frame margin, the top option here, down to 10.11mm instead of 14. And what that does is, if I just go back to the page, you see it's jumped up slightly. So when I'm just going to move this out of the way again. When I'm in engrave mode, you see that you have the music frame here with the blue box. It was the gap here between where the music and the items can start and the edge of the box here. So I just wanted to basically move the music up the page very slightly. So I reduced the music frame margin. I'll just go back so you can see that option. So the music frame margin option here, this top option, I just reduced that slightly to reduce this gap so that it was slightly closer to the page. So I wasn't moving this music frame. I haven't edited the template or anything. I was just adjusting that margin at the top of the page there. And the other thing I noticed was that the gaps between some of the staves and between some of the systems were a lot bigger in Dorico by default, especially now I've made a few other things smaller. So again, in layout options, in vertical spacing, I changed the staff to staff group option here. And actually, I reduced that one in the end down to 6. And you can either type it in the box, and then I just press tab to move out of the box, or you can use these spaces options here. And I reduce this inter-system gap, so the gap between these systems, and I reduce that down to 7. So just press apply on that one. I'll close this because I think I've mostly finished in there. So now, compared to what I had before, now things are more tightly spaced, but actually without doing anything else or dragging any of these staves around or applying anything else, this first page was exactly the same spacing and everything else as the original, which was what I was aiming for. I did find that on page, let me just have a check. I think it was on page 4. This system here actually was this extra bar down here, bar 48, was actually on the same system up here. So what I did then is going to engrave mode, selected this bar line, and I'll select one of these notes up here. So let's have that E there, and then use make into system. And what that's done is put in a system break here and a system break here and force that all into one system. And actually then that made the end of the page is now correct as to where it had put the system breaks. And then I haven't finished this example anyway, so then the music has carried on at that point. So now what I have is, and I've got a shortcut to turn off my signposts. So now I've got the music at the same size and everything else. And like I said, I haven't been dragging anything around or changing anything in really not much in engrave mode. I have done one system break option for the make into system. But apart from that, it's all the Dorico defaults, just changing things like the note spacing a little bit and the staff size a little bit and things like that to match the look of the original part I was copying. So I just thought it was worth looking at some of those, because some things about system breaks and sizing and how do I get more on a page and that kind of thing has been coming up a bit over the summer on the Facebook group. Let's move on. So the next one was actually sent in to me recently by Andre on the Facebook page, and he sent me a drum file, which I'll just open now. This one's using Note Performer. Okay. So he sent me this drum file, and he said, I suppose partly what piqued my interest is I'd like to do this in Dorico without going back to Sibelius if possible. So here is a drum part, and he also sent me a PDF, which I think is what he wanted it to look like. And at the moment, there's some bits in the Dorico file that don't. So I said, how do I match this? So if I leave this on the bottom slightly, actually, let me just drag the bottom of this bit up and we can see both. So down here now we've got the PDF of what we're aiming for, and up here we've got the Dorico version. So the question is, how do we make all this match from what we've imported? Now this could have been imported as a MIDI file. I expect this one was probably a musicxml file. Maybe it's even come out of Sibelius or Finale, probably Sibelius, I guess. The question is, with Dorico's options, how do I easily get this to look correct and look right? We'll start with actually let's start with this bass drum down here, because at the moment it's tied. So what we've got here is everything's all in one voice, and there's some rests at the bottom, which we also don't want. So I'm going to go into setup mode and edit the drum kit. And here, when I edit my drum kit, there's a lot of instruments in here. I can see the kick drum here, and it's a stem direction says up, so I'm going to switch that to down and press apply. So that's now moved this one here. If I just switch this so we can see it a bit, so that's the bass drum is now sorted because it's got those notes in, no problem. So that's good. I also noticed actually there's a couple of other things, odd things in this one. The first is that I think this chord here, which has got a normal note head in the original chord, it's a drum kit, but you know what I mean. It's got a triangle note head, so that will be this wood block here, which probably, I don't know, has either been imported wrong or I don't know, for whatever reason, it's the wrong note head and the wrong instrument. Now, what I would do here is I'd use this option down here to change instrument. So there's this little button down here, and that will change the woodblock instrument. And if I type tom, then I'll put in a tom-tom. I'll put medium because it's in the middle of the staff. So I'll choose tom-tom medium, press change, and that will change this woodblock here to tom-tom medium. Now it says tom-tom medium 3, but that's because there's 2 others. I'm not sure if I need the others at the moment, but I'll leave them for now. But also this tom-tom, you can see over here, it's still got the wrong note head. So I'll go to edit note heads, and this says note head override is triangle up note heads, which I don't want. So I'm just going to change that to unset, because then it will just use the default note head. So there you go. So I've done that, and now I've got the normal note head there. So that's the first bit is this this bass drum here, and this note here are now correct. Now, the other thing is this bar here at the top, where we've got a cymbal and we've got these hi-hats. Now, I'm not 100% sure, not being a drummer, and I noticed there's at least one drummer, hello Andrew, on the chat, so maybe he'll comment on this in a minute. But for a second, if I wanted to duplicate this sort of exactly, apart from that slur that's going through the middle, what you could do is, in that same dialogue I was in, you could assign that to a different voice. So actually, let's do this, because then you'll see what I mean. So if we do edit percussion kit, and we find that it was one of the crash cymbals, I think it was crash cymbal 2. If I put that into a second voice, so if I press that and press apply, you'll get this, which is this rest here, and all of these notes here, and you get a rest up there. So let's have a look. Which is, similar. That rest for some reason is buried in there, and that rest exists there. Now, I'm not quite sure if that's exactly what we want. Maybe actually that would be better if it was just dotted, so that other rest disappeared. I don't know. But this rest here, to get rid of this one's interesting, because in Dorico, actually, the best option at the moment is if you select these hi-hats here, because this rest is part of these hi-hats, right-click on them, and then go to percussion, change voice. And if you use extra upstem voice, the difference with the extra upstem voices is that they don't have rests. So they'll get rid of that extra rest. If I just said actually use an upstem voice, one of these other upstem voices, they have rests. But if I do extra upstem voice, the extra ones don't have that rest, so it will get rid of it. So if I wanted to copy this exactly, and yes, you could drag out the lasso vibra bit if you wanted to, and that kind of thing. I'm not going to bother. Then to get rid of that rest, that's what I would do in that case. I'd use an extra upstem voice. So maybe maybe that's what you want. Actually, personally, I'm not a drummer, but I'd probably keep them all in the same voice. So if I just undo a lot for a minute and put this back as it was, I would probably just make that shorter. Maybe the tie, the lasso vibra kind of extend thing you do want. I don't know in this particular case, but you've got options there. You could use an extra upstem voice if that would be suitable. There was something else as well. I'm just checking my notes because I had to make a note of the things that I changed. Oh yes, this option here, this bass drum note here, I believe this is probably a kick drum that's similar to this one, but it's the second kick drum in I think in the Yamaha XG kit. Actually, what I would probably do, because it would also probably help with the rests down here, is I would probably, and because it appears later in the piece as well, I'd also change this kick drum to be stems down as well, and do that. And that also sorts out the rest at the bottom handily anyway, and display it this way, which I think is, as far as I know, is quite clear. I just seen a comment by Andrew. Thank you. I'd do that too. The tied symbol wouldn't be written as a natural decay, which doesn't need a tie. Yes, this one. So this has a lasso vibra tie on it. So you probably turn that off and notate it this way. But there are options there, depending on which way you want to do it. As I said yesterday when I was in Amsterdam, there's no there aren't any standards for drum kits. Well, no, there are standards. There's lots of them, and that's why we try and accommodate as many as possible. I also noticed there were some rhythms like this one here. Now, actually, in the original file, where am I looking? This bar here, bar 13. I don't really like the way this is written. Maybe that's just me. I'm not going to duplicate this exact rhythm. I guess you'd probably do it with forced duration, but I don't think that's any clearer to a drummer than this rhythm. However, this bit here, I'd either make this shorter so that it's not tied, or if you really want it to be held on, then you could extend the note. So if you change your rhythm grid, then you can just press Alt, Shift, and right arrow and extend that one. So again, I'm not necessarily sure which one you want to do on that one, but I wouldn't probably put the notes in a rest. And once I've done one of these, you could then, of course, just Alt click them into other places if they also appear in other places. But actually, maybe what you'd do here is you'd actually just make it a short, really short note and a rest after it. Again, there's probably a couple of different views on it. But I think the rest of it now, because we've sorted out the voices, the main problem being that the bass drum wasn't initially stems down, then that now a lot more closely matches the original, which I believe is what we're looking for at this point. And there are a couple of other points in the same piece now, like for example, this bar here is now fixed a bit better because I've added the second bass drum also into that second voice. And there's a couple of other things, similar things that you might also tweak in this file, but they're all now relatively similar to things we've already done. So I just wanted to show you those examples. While I'm in this file, though, there is something else, a couple of other things I thought was worth showing. So sorry, Andre, I'm just going to break this for a minute and add some extra bars at the end. So when I add extra bars, because I'm in a part layout, by default, I'll get the tasset al fine and I'll have this big multi-rest at the end. Oh, sorry, I'm just reading the comments. Somebody said, what's the alt-click trick? That was just the copy and paste thing. I found out apparently today that it also exists in Finale. But it's definitely a Sibelius thing. If you have something selected and you alt-click somewhere else, it will copy it. So if I do that, it will copy it to the new location. So it's the same as copy and paste, but it means you can have something selected and just alt-click somewhere else and it'll copy it. Sorry, as I was. So they've got this tasset al fine. Now there's a new option or a couple of new options in the shortcuts that you can now assign if you want to a shortcut to toggle the multi-rests. So I've decided, for now at least, I've got Control-Shift-M, which is my multi-rest toggle. And it's so that you don't have to keep going into layout options and going to players and these options, the consolidate non-multi-bar rests and multi-bar rests and bar rests. The shortcut will now get you between all of these. So you can see as I'm just pressing the shortcut, it will toggle around all of these depending on what you need. But it means you can now do that instead of having to do it in one, go to the dialog every time. You can just assign a shortcut to that one. So you'll find it when you set up your regular key commands, then you can find it in here. It's in the edit section. So if you're looking for consolidating, change bar consolidation, you can add a shortcut there. That wasn't the reason I was doing it. The reason is that I wanted to say in here that somebody on Facebook recently was then adding a slash region, or they're adding slash notes and getting extra rests. Now in Dorico 2.1, when you add a slash region to this, you now don't get the extra rests in this bar by default. What would have happened is this show of the voices would have been on. So these extra rests here and here would have started to appear when you started to use slashes. And so, but if you use a slash region now, by default, that won't happen. If it's an old project that you're now using in Dorico 2.1, then you might need to come in here and toggle that off in the preferences. But for new projects, that will happen by default. Also, and you might, if you were if you were using slashes with stems, then you might also want to change the slash type and add with stems. So now this bit here gives you a very quick and simple way of doing it instead of having to use a separate downstem slashed voice, because you get extra rests if you're doing that from the other parts. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, it's probably not a problem for you. But if you're in the Facebook group and reading this yesterday, apologies, I can't remember. I think it was Simon who was talking about it, and I said, "Oh yes, sorry, it's a new thing in 2.1." So I thought I'd just show that now. Right. So the next thing I wanted to look at, actually, I'm going to do as a new project. It was something sent to me by I think it was Carl Henrik on the Facebook page, but I forgot to ask if I could use his file. So I'm going to set this up as a new project and do it that way. So let's say we've got a couple of instruments. So we'll have a trumpet and a piano, and let's say they're in some time signature or other, and they've got 100 bars. So here's flow 1. Now, what I'm then going to do is click on flow 1. Actually, I'll right-click on flow 1, duplicate flow, and I'll do that a couple of times so that I've got multiple flows. There we go. So now I've got flow 1, and I've got flow 3, and I've got flow 2. Well done, me. Let's just drag those around the other way. Flow 1, flow 2, flow 3. Now, what the question was that in his particular case, he noticed that, of course, we've got page numbers up here and up here, but at the start of a new flow, we don't have any page numbers. And there was some confusion about why or how to get those to appear. Was it just an option that you tick somewhere, and how do we do it? So what I'm going to do now is I'll show you what I told him at the time. So in engrave mode, for any of the other pages, so let's go back to the beginning. So page 2 here, and here is page 2 on the right-hand side in this panel. When I click on page 2, it says it's using the default master page. If I double click on the default master page, then up here in the top corner, you can see there's a little, I'll double click in it so you can, in fact, I might have to make that a bit bigger so we can see it. So here, if I make this bigger, you can see there's a little token here which says page at. And then if I go across to the other page, the other side, because this is shown as a spread here, 2 pages, then in this side, there's the same thing over here, but right justified against this margin. And when I didn't make any changes. If I click on page 1, so the beginning where we have the flow titles and that kind of thing, you'll see that down here and the right-hand side, it says we're using the first master page template. So if I double click on that one, you see this one doesn't have any page numbers anywhere. So that's why we don't get any page numbers at the beginning of a new flow. So let's add them into here. So I'll add a new text frame somewhere. And into here, I think it was size 10, and you can write it in like that. So it just says page, and it needs to be left justified in this particular case. Here it is. You can drag these boxes and make them whatever size you like. Actually, I need this one to be relatively small. And actually, I've created it in the wrong place. So I'm going to drag it up to where I want it to be in the top left corner. And now on the other side, we'll do the same again. So we'll say over here, we'll drag out a little box. If you get this when you double click on it and you get the flow title, press escape. When you click on this box here, if you press what is it I did? Oh yes, no, I didn't click on the box. I accidentally clicked on the blob here. So press tab, and that will now select the box. If you press tab again, you can select each of the individual items of the box. So I press tab, so I've just got the box selected. Now when I press enter, then I can put the text in the right one. If you double click on it, you'll accidentally click on the wrong item in many cases. That also needs to be size 10. And in this particular case, this wants to be right justified. Oops, I'm clicking on the wrong thing again. There we go. See, I'm doing it again. I'm double clicking here because I kind of got used to doing it and I shouldn't. So now I've got this item selected here. Press enter, and I can edit the text in that box instead. So, and you can see the problem I've got is I'm trying to get over there to the right item. Now, yeah, I know somebody's thinking, yeah, you should make this better. Yes, we will. We'll make it better one day. So what I want to do is, I've lost my flow now. Oh yes, sorry. I wanted to make that so it was justified, didn't I? Because otherwise it's left justified. So I mean, if all else fails, if you're struggling with this kind of thing, what I've often done is just grab one, drag it out of the way, and then you can double click on it as much as you like. Put it somewhere else if you want. But one mistake you might make with these that you want to make sure you don't do is if you make one over here and then press the copy page layout left to right, then the left justified option that you've set also happens to this one. You'll end up with 2 left justified boxes, and this one wants to be right justified. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'll press apply anyway. Now it's in the right place. I'll press close. And now you see I've got a page number here and a page number here. Let's just jump into write mode. And page numbers, actually, I've not put them in quite the right place. They should be a bit smaller nearer the top of the page if they were to be in alignment. But you can now see how you get page numbers or anything else. And these page numbers can be anywhere. You could put them at the top as part of the flow titles. You could put them at the bottom with the copyright details if you wanted to. But you can now see that there are 2 templates in action here, one for this flow here and one for all of the subsequent flows. So we have one here for the first page in any flow, and one for all of the subsequent ones. And the first one by default doesn't have page numbers. So that was the other example I wanted to show. Yeah, Gunther, yes, I've lost my flow. Yes, no, it was just there on the screen, wasn't it? And I know I could hear you all say, no, look, your flow is there. Yes, all right. A question about divisi strings. Yes, if you've got text that you want to, well, actually, if you've got text that you want to display like that, I'd probably just use the Shift X. Oh, yes, sorry, somebody's just replied that. Yes, use Shift X and type in Divisi. Things like A2 and that kind of thing. At the moment, yes, you probably do that. Will we ever add buttons to automatically center boxes in engrave mode? Yes, I believe we will, but I don't know when. I say I believe so because back a while ago, kind of quite a long time ago, I've seen what the buttons might look like, but we haven't built the functionality yet for those. So yes, aligning things horizontally and vertically, and and those kind of things. Yes, we've got lots of ideas for engrave mode, for some useful options and things that we could put in there, but unfortunately we haven't done them yet. Most publishers don't want a page number on the first page, but at the beginning of every other flow. How to do that? Well, you've got master pages down here. You can also, with these master pages, decide to make other master pages. So you can press plus and make a new master page set, and it could be a new first or default or a custom one. And you can then choose for any page. You can right click on it and choose a master page change. So say from this point on, or for this page, which master page do you want? So you could have left the first one, for example, not having page numbers on it, and make a new one, say call it subsequent if you want, or subsequent titles, or name it however you want, and just add page numbers into that one if that would be useful. Let me just check if there's any other questions. How do I start a flow to with page one again? I believe there's also a flow page token. If anybody remembers what the token is, then shout now. Otherwise, Mindaugas, I'll email you, or I'll get in touch. I think you're on our Facebook group with the details of that one, because also the tokens file I have at the moment doesn't have all of the new tokens, or a lot of the new tokens in it. So we need to do a new one of those. So maybe I can put that in our Facebook group as well. Similarly, actually, with the popovers, we need to do it. There's a new version of the popovers file PDF that we need to do with a lot of the things like the repeat mode, the repeat popover and things like that, and what you can type in it, and slashes and all of those kind of things. We need to do one of those as well and make that available. So hopefully that would help. A couple of other things. So a couple of new things that have come up in version 2.1. I'm aware that I've already been nattering on for half an hour, so I'll make some of these quick. And then if there's things that maybe there's new things in 2.1 that you really want to see that we haven't looked at in more detail, let me know for another session. So very quickly, so in a new, let's have a quick new file with piano and drums in it. I didn't add the piano, did I? Oh, I did. Yeah, there we go. We have drums. I didn't actually add the piano. Well done, me. Along with various other things, in fact, I should have imported this one. You can now, when you use musicxml to import things, rhythm slashes and bar repeats will now be imported automatically as well. And also bar repeats will now play back. So if we do that'll do. And let's say we've got a drum part. Which octave are we in? This one? No, wrong one. Yep, well done, mate. Oh, there we go. I knew I'd get there eventually. MIDI keyboard with not enough buttons on it. So now when you've got some extra blank bars, which I've just gone to put in the wrong place, and you do repeat sections. So let's say this bit we take, and obviously you can press R and repeat it. But what we're going to do here is just say, make me a repeated region. So Shift R and repeat that. So now those will play back. Okay, yes, we would have loved to have added that initially, but we didn't. So now they'll play back. Also, there's a new, you'll probably have noticed there's a new swing option. So let's quickly look at some of those. So if I press Shift T and I can start typing swing, there's a number of options: 2-to-1 swing, 3-to-1 swing, heavy, light, medium, or straight. So the idea being here, you can just say heavy swing, and when you press play, it sounds like the Archers. Now, so you can change some of these, and also I know somebody's going to say, well, what's the difference between some of these? If you go into playback options, so play menu and playback options and timing, then there's a default rhythmic field for the file. And if you click edit, then you can get a bit more detail about what some of these mean. So here are the options here on the left. And then on the right-hand side, it's telling us what's going on. So the 2-to-1 swing fixed is a ratio of 2-to-1. So let's put a percentage for you, 66%. You can drag this slider if you want to. So if you want to change it to be more or less of a swing, then you can do that for the defined options. And then there's a 3-to-1 swing. So the 2-to-1, I suppose, is probably a bit the triplet option. The 3-to-1 is more like if you're talking kind of semiquavers, 3-to-1. And similarly, if you go to heavy swing, then there's heavy, medium, and light. Now, the difference between these options, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, and the heavy, light, medium, is that heavy, light, and medium have a depends on tempo option. So here you can write heavy swing, and if it's a tempo between 90 and 250, there are different options. And it will then be a kind of a sliding scale. If you have a look in our version history document, it tells you there's a couple of very clever guys who've analysed basically lots of people playing swing, and worked out that the faster people play, normally the less of a swing there is. So you don't normally want such a heavy swing at fast speeds, but you might at slower speeds. So this is where you can define this. And we've set 3 for you, but you can come in here and change these, and you can also add your own options if you want to have a medium light swing or an incredibly heavy swing, or you can change them and tweak them to your heart's desire. You can also vary the tempos here that they will apply between, and of course the ratios. So the idea being that you don't normally have to think about it. You can just set your favorite type, and if your piece speeds up slightly, then the swing will also adjust accordingly based on the tempo, which is very clever. Also, and you can do it in other programs too, but if you select a particular instrument when you do Shift T, so for example, you can say straight. You can, like with lots of our other popovers, you can press Alt Enter, and you can then apply the rhythm just to one staff. So you can have an insanely heavy swing at this end, and you can have then a straight swing if you want to for something else. I'm sure jazz-wise, I should use the jazz font. That's obviously going to make actually quite a big difference playback-wise to a lot of things. But sometimes, you may want to just choose individuals. I mean, if it's bebop, they're not really swinging anyway, so you might want to also adjust the ratios of the swing and what's happening there depending on the tempos. We can use this file while I'm in here. So there's also an option. In fact, we'll go into the part, and this again, it came up on the Facebook page again a little while ago. Somebody said when they've got some music that's got multirests in like this, the number is displayed between. So on a grand staff instrument like this, you've got the number between. Now, I personally quite like that, but somebody said, but in, I think it was Hollywood style, or maybe it's a film score style, they actually want that the number above and below. Now, I kind of wonder completely personally, is this just because that's what other software did and therefore it's kind of become a standard? I don't know. But anyway, if you really need to be able to display that to appease an engraver or otherwise, then if you go into engraving options now and go to rests, then scroll down here. This option is the standard show between staves, but you can say show above each staff and just apply that in engraving options. So now you get both of the numbers. So if that makes people happy, great. A couple of other quick new things in the play menu now. When you go to playback template, if you've got any problems with sounds or things not working, and you just want to reset things, simply going into this dialog and then pressing OK is enough to reload this default template, the HSSE and HSO. So it's the one that includes Hallin Symphonic Orchestra, and that will reload the playback template. Obviously, because I have Note Performer installed, I can also switch to Note Performer. But you'll also notice there's a new one called Silence. Some people prefer working in notation without bleeps and things happening when they click on things, or they don't need, if they're cleverer than me, they don't need playback. It also, of course, would speed the system up slightly because it's not having to load samples and think about samples. So you can switch to silence if you want to, and then there will be no playback. You see there's no instruments in the VSG instrument rack anymore, and you'll have no playback. So yeah, that for some people will be a really useful option. Oops, selected the wrong option. But you can go back to playback template and just at any point switch on that again. It will reload all of the defaults in the instrument rack on the right hand side. So if you just need, if you want silence for a bit, either for system requirement reasons or because you don't need playback right now, just choose a different template. While I was in here in the playback options, this is where we were looking at timing. The playback of non-standard tonality systems now works. So not just 12 and 24 EDO, which is equal divisions of the octave. So for a standard octave is divided into 12 notes, of course. And if you want 3/4 tone sharps and flats, it's divided into 24. But you can decide your own tonality systems in Dorico and your own sharps and flats and types. And there's 72 EDO and there's some non-EDO options. But all of those will now play back. So it doesn't matter which ones you choose, and you can define your own tonality systems. They will all play back. And also, if you don't like the fact that A is 440 and you want to, in some countries, they might use a different tuning system or just a different pitch for A, then you can also decide that now in Dorico, and you can change it here in the playback options dialog. I just thought it was worth mentioning that a little bit. There's a couple of things that might have escaped you, like in the play menu for tracks. You can now decide if you want a video track to appear up here. There's also an option for a marker track if you want that to display up here, so that when you add markers, they will also display. So there's the little things like that. I mentioned that clicking on the header up here will make that play for MIDI through, which is quite nice. You might find with sometimes when you open projects, in the general preferences, there is an option now which will warn you if a project was last saved in an earlier or later version. There's also one about saving projects from an earlier or later version to a new location. So there's options for especially if you're working with somebody else. When you open a file, you can opt to be told, so for the warning message to pop up to say this was previously in an earlier version, and if you want to keep it in that earlier version, then so you don't accidentally save over it, you can tick this second one, so that it'll save it to a new location instead of overwriting the original file. So I think you might find that this option is on by default. So if you get a pop-up message when you open a file just after updating Dorico and it's annoying, just come into preferences, turn that off. If you don't care, it will go away again. Very quickly, things like slash regions now. If I put in a slash region here when I've already got some notes, then they will still play back. So I might have accidentally showed this before, but it's now available in 2.1. So if you write a solo or anything else in behind the music, then you can just put slash like that over the top, and the solo that you've written will still play back. But then, of course, you could put chord symbols or anything else above the slashes. So for playback reasons, that might be quite useful for you. There's a couple of nice little things like up here in the top right-hand corner. If you click on the time up here, you can get to display it in various options. So you can have bar beat tick, or you can have elapsed time, or you can display time code, depending on what you want to use. Similarly, in our pop out one, you can choose what you want to display over here on the right hand side as well. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things, so I'll stop talking. If you please download the version history document, you can get it from a number of places, our download page or the Steinberg download assistant. There's a PDF there which goes into the detail of what's in a lot of the new features in here. So, for example, maybe if it's of interest, we can look into some of these other features in more detail in another session. So there's a whole notehead sets and notehead editor. So if you wanted to do music, for example, in fact, maybe I already did a quick example. Different notation styles of different types of notehead. So you can do things like this one here, where what looks like quavers, eighth notes, they're actually displayed with open note heads. So for older types of music, they might be quite useful. The version history document will also tell you other things about creating different types of note heads. In fact, somebody asked about color the other day, earlier. You can individually color things. So you can already color your own note heads individually, but you can't at the moment say, all of the Cs are the same color. Maybe I'd investigate in the notehead editor, because that's where you can set things like the Aiken 7 shape and that kind of thing. I don't think you can color them at the moment, but we could look into those. So there's a whole options for notehead sets and different types of note heads that you can use if you want to play with those now. This is what the editor looks like. There's things like if you're going straight into Cubase, then when you export audio now, you can export stems. So if I have a larger file, which I don't really, but this one will do, you can now say on this one, when you go to export, oops, actually, I'll just click on the option. You can choose to export players as separate files. And so what that one's going to do is give you stems for each of the individual bits, so that you can then go into Cubase or another DAW and you can mix them further from there. There's all sorts of other things in here. And of course, this will also tell you any of the new shortcuts that we've put in for things as well. So this document is certainly worth reading. I do like the new Divisi label option, actually. I've used those already. But please, read the version history document and then let me know what we'd like to see in the next session. Is it that, looking at answering questions like we have at the beginning of the session, when we looked at a few examples people had emailed in and said, how do I do this in Dorico? Or, can you help me with, cleaning this up and that kind of thing? Those kind of things. Is that what you'd like to look at in another session? Would it be useful to start a project and of a particular type and go through more note entering options and kind of tips and things on how, or multiple different ways you could enter notes in a particular style or a different type of music? So looking at a big band score on one session, or an orchestral score or a choral score, those kind of things. Please let me know what would be useful on those. There's a new propagate part layout option. Would it be useful to look into that kind of thing? Those kind of things. So email me on discoverdorico@steinberg.de, or if you either in the comments on the YouTube video, or if you jump over to our Facebook group, then you can join in the conversations on there as well, and let me know what you'd like to see in a further session. So sorry if it's a bit longer than some of the other sessions. I'm just going to quickly check some of the comments and see if there's anything on there before we finish. Ancient Groove, yes, you can play back different tunings. So you can set up your own tunings, completely set up your own types of tuning. We've only looked into that. There are some videos already online where we've looked into a few of those, but if setting something like that up would be useful in another session for a few people, then maybe we can do that. But yes, certainly you can set up your own tuning systems and they will all now play back. It uses VST note expression to do the playback. So the individual notes will be retuned. So it's not like using a MIDI pitch bend or something like that. When you have a chord, they won't all bend in the same direction. So that you get a lot more of the options you actually want. How do you write swing or straight as tempo text? You use Shift-T. Let's go back to my, which file was it? The second one or the first one? This one. So this option that I put in here, I'll just delete that. So I can select something where I want to go from, and I can type Shift-T. And then if I type, no, I see what you mean. You don't just mean as the displaying it on the screen up there. I see. I thought you meant these kind of options. So yes, and you notice a little rhythmic feel option here. And if anybody knows, maybe you've pulled online, what does that do? No idea. But yeah, you can still write those as you'll probably put those in, probably with other things. So, for example, you could say, this kind of thing. And you can do it that way. So the signpost is that I've just hidden is what's going to make it play back. But this bit here, you can add it in, of course, as the metronome text. Space. I don't understand the question about a space after that. Oh, sorry. Yes, when I entered it, I think you meant. So if I do this, yes, I was writing 6 equals 120 space because I wanted to put something else in. Yes. So I just hit the space bar and then type something in like that. Things like crotchet equals minim and that kind of thing isn't yet possible by default because it's a metric modulation type of option that at the moment Dorico doesn't do by default. You can do them as text effectively. You probably do them as system text, and copy and paste them from the Smoofle website. But there isn't a default option for those at the moment. Oops, sorry, just hit the microphone. Apologies for that. Yes, and Paul's answered part of that one. So I think that's mostly it. If I've missed something, like I said, you can get in touch with me by email, discoverdorico@steinbo.de, or on the Facebook group, or you can go to our forum. The forum is also a good place to get in touch with our developers, or if you think you've got a question or something you'd like to be added to the program, that kind of thing. Certainly the forum is a good place. You can just go to dorico.com/forum. That'll take you to the Steinberg forum for Dorico. So I'll end the session there. If there's any anything you'd like to see in the next session I'm planning to be it'll be a Wednesday at the end of September, so I'll make sure that we get that added into the YouTube calendar, and then all you need to do is press the subscribe button and don't forget the little bell so that you're then notified as when we're live and when the next video is going to be there. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.